Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. All right. This evening, I would like to offer as the Dhamma reflection a topic that uh, I feel like I'm talking about all the time. This is the main meditation object that I use for my own meditation. But I realized in reflecting on it that it's not that I'm talking about it all the time in groups. I'm often talking to people about it one on one. And most recently, when I was asked to talk about it, I wasn't even asked to talk about it directly. It was more like people were saying, "Well, you know, Bante, there are people online who are interested in hearing about body contemplation," and that's kind of how this goes. So this topic is the 32-part contemplation part of mindfulness of the body, and there's a lot of mystique around it. There's a lot of love hate dynamics, attraction aversion dynamics. There's a lot of confusion about it, and even in this day where all of the Buddha's teachings are available, and it's very easy to go and look, it's quite difficult to find good sources of training and material for how to use it, even for monastics. So I'm always very happy to elucidate this because, again, this is my favorite meditation technique. It's one I always return to, and it's one that brings me a lot of joy, a lot of equanimity, and through seeing the insights that can come from it, a lot of faith in the Dhamma. Yeah, so it's, to me, this is not an obscure or minor technique, but this is one of the major techniques. So first, a little background as to why that is. So the Buddha, he went forth as a monastic into a time in ancient India where there are all sorts of meditation practices, and he tried them all, and he mastered a number of them, such that the teachers were willing to take him on as their equal, as their peer. But he left practice after practice behind. And finally, he settled on mindfulness of the breath as a vehicle for concentrating his mind and developing psychic powers. But this didn't liberate him until he discovered the Eightfold Path and until he discovered Samma Samadhi, or the jhanas, and was able to not only concentrate his mind, but to cause the defilements to cease and then to look back over his existence. Now, he used mindfulness of breathing, but after his enlightenment and after he was requested to teach, which in the words that Laura just recited, he was asked to teach for the benefit of the multitudes, the Buddha did not begin teaching mindfulness of breathing. This was a good and balanced meditation technique, but he saw that there was a meditation technique which was much more direct and much more capable of producing the insight which had set him free. And so he began teaching the unattractiveness of the body, Asubha meditation, and expanding on it probably into mindfulness of the body as we know it today. This was the technique he gave to help develop the mind and help to develop an understanding of dukkha, the Four Noble Truths. Why do you want to be free? Well, because being, a human in a human body is not always pleasant. Yeah. And it's to find an escape from suffering, a freedom from suffering, that we undertake this. So the Buddha didn't inherit mindfulness of the body. He invented it. It wasn't present at the time, and he developed it and explained it and personally taught it to his students. Now, it came a time after some, we don't know exactly, in some number of years, probably, or maybe even more than a decade, it came to be that all of the students who could quickly be enlightened by this had gotten enlightened. And now the Buddha was starting to teach people who were a bit thicker and, needed more time and more hands-on approach. And it came to be that the Buddha really needed to take a break. He needed to go on vacation. And the commentaries suggest what was to follow was based on karma, and he knew that there was no dealing with it. But I suspect, I'm not very impressed by that. I think he knew what was going to happen, but he also knew that for a teacher to just hover around his students, never being able to leave, that's not sustainable, yeah? And so he went on vacation, he went on retreat, and he left the Sangha to tend to itself. And during that time, the monks who were practicing mindfulness of the unattractive nature of the body got disgusted with their bodies and began to loathe their bodies and hate their bodies. And thereby developing hate, they started to commit suicide. And then they hired somebody to just kill them so that they weren't having to commit suicide. And that very dark episode in the Sangha was something the Buddha emerged from meditation and kind of casually asks Ananda, though he probably suspected, why is the Sangha so much smaller? It was at that time that the Buddha recognized that though mindfulness of the body is very direct, is very powerful, is very insightful, and helps show us dukkha, it is a technique which you really want to have a teacher for. And so as I explain it, I also explain that backstory to say that please, if you have any questions, email me, info@upavana.org, get in contact, we'll talk about it. And I'm very happy to talk about it all day. I just love talking about body parts. It's just such an interesting topic. Yeah, and I don't mind at all. But if you are going to embark on it, then know it's fairly safe. It's just that you want to check in with a teacher or a peer who is also doing this meditation from time to time, or you can get lost. It was at that time that the Buddha gave mindfulness of breathing, which is not always enlightening, was already existing in the world, but is still a very good meditation technique. And the most important thing is it's a lot like sugar, yeah? Sugar is not always beneficial, but even in those cases where it's harmful, it's not terribly harmful. Our bodies burn sugar very quickly all the time, and mindfulness of breathing is like that. It's not good for absolutely every scenario, but it's safe, even in those cases where it's not the best meditation technique. And so he began teaching mindfulness of breathing, and things balanced out, because that's a very balancing meditation subject. But now the topic of the night is the mindfulness of the body. And I find that because it's been hard to find teachers who really have taken this on as their main subject, though I've been very lucky to have teachers who are experienced in it. I've had to develop some understanding of it myself, but I also really appreciate what is written in the Visuddhimagga, which is a piece of a collection of commentary that came about quite a bit after the Buddha. And this is not canonical. It's not from the Buddha's mouth. But the Visuddhimagga, some people don't realize, is actually the writer, the creator of the Visuddhimagga, Buddhaghosa, was tasked by the Sangha at the time to create that work by looking at the commentaries, all of the work of all of the teachers that had come after the Buddha, and looking at all of that, which was a big, massive library and probably a big, massive mess of contradicting information, to look at all of that and distill it down so that the Sangha could kind of clean the slate and get rid of the contradictions and all of that, and just have one big block of commentaries. And in that, we find a very thorough explanation of this meditation subject. So most people know this meditation subject as the 32 parts of the body. And this is where it's explained in depth. But monastics first get taught this as the 5 parts of the body. And so even novices, even children who come to the temple and take the novice ordination, this is their first meditation subject, because at that time you have a teacher to guide you. So why not give you the technique, which is going to be the most effective at dealing with your most basic defilements, yeah? And so that's how I'll talk about this. And now there is a list of 32 parts, but I'll focus on the explanation of the 5 parts, because that'll make this explanation a lot quicker, yeah? All right, so maybe a little question to get the mental gears turning, like, why is this important? So little question for contemplation. I thought of a question that has only one right answer. So can you answer this question using less than 5 body parts? And yeah, if you guessed it, there's only one right answer to that question, and that is no, you can't. Now, some of you might be like, well, I bet I could come up with a list of body parts, like I have 2 hands and 2 feet and a head. And yes, that very, very arbitrary list might fall within the criteria, but in any list that was more related to our experience of having a human body, even if we were to say, well, I will only count parts that have a distinct word for them in the English language, you would still use several dozen body parts to respond to that question, whether you were speaking the answer, or whether you were typing the answer, or whether you were pressing a button on a machine to produce a sound. Even if you were a quadriplegic and you were using your eyelids to trigger a computer, you would still be using more than 5 body parts, even going from the Buddha's list of 32 parts, to say nothing of the hundreds of parts you could break it up into. And this is why this technique is so powerful, because it attacks and it shines light on what is the lowest common denominator, what we call bhava, or becoming. You might not realize it, but no matter what thought you have, you cannot express that thought without, through speech or action, without using your body. Yeah. And so when we in the human realm become something, we become our body, because this is our conduit into the world. This is the thing we have control over. This is how we speak and act. This is how we enact karma. And so if we were to break this link, so that thoughts do not immediately generate speech or action, we would have broken the link of bhava, of becoming, because we can't develop the karma that perpetuates ignorance and existence. Yeah, we would wake up to the reality that our thoughts and our body are 2 different things. Yeah, and that our body is not ourselves. The Buddha says, if you took the body to be yourself, you would be better than if you took consciousness to be yourself, because in 100 years, the body would drop dead and you would see that you were wrong. Whereas if you took your consciousness to be yourself, it's already arising and ceasing all the time. You'll never just simply see it, stop and develop insight very quickly. But we have a body. And so why not focus our attention on this place where we can break the links of becoming? And now when I ask that question, can you answer this question using less than 5 body parts? What had to happen, yeah? In order to even think of your answer, you had to think of what are body parts. And like I said, the lists are kind of arbitrary, like what is a body part. But nevertheless, you had to come up with a list. Now, many people have not thought of how many body parts there are, and so they don't have a ready-made list, and so it was kind of scattered. But the Buddha provides a very simple list, and the 5 parts are given even to children, yeah, even to 7-year-olds, saying this is your meditation subject. Take these 5 parts, and what's suggested is to begin by reciting these parts, and to recite them forwards and to recite them backwards. And it's a very simple technique, such as you would give a child, but it should not be overlooked. This is where the technique really begins, with the verbal recitation. Yeah, why? Because until you can do that competently, don't even try wielding your mind. Don't even try directing your attention until you can do a simple physical activity without getting distracted. Yeah, that's the basis of sitting meditation. Until you can sit still and not get up and do something else, you are not meditating, no matter what you are doing with your mind. Yeah, until you can do a regular activity. So with this technique, the verbal recitation is the first activity. And the 5 body parts that are taught to every novice monk, and therefore every monk, is hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. And so you would go about it: hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, skin, teeth, nails, hair of the body, hair of the head. Through this verbal recitation, you're going to practice being consistent, not going too fast, not going too slow, not leaving parts out, not skipping to the parts you like, not avoiding the parts that you don't like, but just being systematic. This is a great way to focus the mind. Be systematic, be continuous in your application. Yeah. And so it's very simple. You just do this. Yeah? Hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. Skin, teeth, nails, hair of the body, hair of the head. You might say, really? Really? This is the creation of the enlightened Buddha? This has been passed down for 2,600 years? And I'd say yes. Think about what you identify on another person. What do you see of another person to create a sense of who they are? How do you recognize them? You look at the hair of the head, you look at the hair of the body, the nails, teeth, and skin. This is some basic things that you can see, whether they have their eyes closed or not, their mouth open or not. You perceive these things. And that gives you a sense of who you're looking at. And furthermore, what their emotion is, are they a danger or not? All of this data we're processing all the time. I've heard that 60% of all communication is body language. We're picking up so much data, from hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. Yeah? So why hair of the head and hair of the body? What do those refer to? So hair of the head is different than hair of the body, and you may not have considered it, but it grows a lot longer, and it grows in a very specific spot. So I can't do this by looking at the screen. I just got to do it. So you go around and you trace the outline of where head hairs are going to arise. And not all animals have distinct a mane, but human beings do. So we tend to do very funny things with our head hairs and to take them very seriously. Yeah, and they grow in a very specific spot, and they grow in a very specific way. Though you might want to blur that and say, well, it's really no different than the hair on my chin or my eyelashes. And really, I mean, structurally, it's not. But in another way, it's useful to make this distinction. Yeah, we tend to see head hairs and look for head hairs for a quick way of identifying people, and then hair of the body, so much of it. Yeah, if you want to be really impressed with how much this covers, just sit down and count how many places that hair arises. It is all over the body. Yeah. There are even little hairs inside the ear canal that we use to hear sounds. There's hair in the nostrils to filter the air coming in. Some of us have hair on our knuckles, and that's why you can't even type without using body hairs. Yeah, probably didn't think that, but your body hairs are involved in the process. But as you go, yeah, body hairs, because you know, it's an animal body, you know, it's covered in hair is not surprising. That there would be anywhere that it doesn't have hair would be surprising. Nails, we have fingernails and we have toenails. And nails are a great place to see something you might have missed in hair. Specifically, they're dead. Yeah. Now hairs are dead. They're not dead at the point they make contact with the blood, and that is there's a growing group of cells there that produce the hairs and nails. But you can see it very clearly with the nails themselves. That upper layer is just hard material. Yeah. Same with the teeth. Yeah. They're there in the mouth. And by the way, there are a lot of them. If you've ever really contemplated them, then yeah, there's a bunch. And how many, the Visuddhimagga will tell you. If you go and look at it, it'll say you've got 4 of them that are in the front that have just one root, and you've got 4 more on each side of that that have 2 roots, and you've got 8 more that have 3 roots, and then you've got a bunch of them that have 4 roots. You probably don't know how many roots each tooth has, but that's the depth of information that you're processing all the time, whether or not you know it. Yeah. And these, again, just like the fingers, the fingernails, the toenails, it's dead material with a core of living material at the point of contact. Yeah, so we feel pain around these things, but how much of that pain is mental pain? Yeah, is assumed pain, not actual pain of damage to a living tissue, but damage to a dead tissue that we're taking very seriously. Now, the final one is the skin, and this is actually a very intriguing body part because it's so thin, and it doesn't seem that way. Often, when we think about the body, we think about its form as being quite full, and we grab the skin and we're like, well, no, there's a lot there. I mean, sure, it's not. It's not as, I understand there's muscle underneath, but if you really get to it, what you're grabbing there is muscle and fat, and the skin itself is literally paper thin. And so paying attention to skin is paying attention to what wraps the body and is the point of contact. Yeah, and that upper level is dead. Because if it were alive, then moving through the world would be excruciating, right? Every motion would be death. Yeah, every scraping across the surface would be death. But since the outer layer is already dead, it's not that big a deal. It's falling off all the time as it's getting pushed up and new materials coming out from the bottom. But how much do we imbue? Is all the race, debates, the pigment of skin is just there in that paper thin outer layer. Yeah. That's as far as race extends in terms of physical structure. Yeah. And, it's so much is going on, and our skin is always changing, always adapting. We're out in the sun too long, or we don't get out in the sun enough, and it changes. Yeah. We get a lot of water and it changes. We get not enough water and it changes. Changing all the time, showing us this characteristic of impermanence, instability. Yeah. So these are the 5 body parts, and just moving one way through them, moving back through them, and mastering the ability to be applied, be continuous. That's the verbal recitation. Now, if you are in public, if you're in a quiet meditation hall, you might not be doing it verbally. It's good to, as you're developing, and to start that way, but at some point you're going to know it's possible to do this mentally. Or if you're in a situation where you don't have much choice, you might have to start and doing it mentally. And cross that gap. Yeah, but I still do it verbally from time to time, especially if I'm involved in walking somewhere, or I know I'm restless. I fall back on the verbal recitation to bring my mind some stability. Yeah. The next step is the mental recitation, and that's where you're doing the same process, but you're doing it mentally. So just thinking: hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin, skin, teeth, nails, hair of the body, hair of the head. And working through it and developing the skill of keeping your mind on task, which is different. You can get the body to do certain patterns, but how easy is it to get the mind? The mind has no form. It can change direction and momentum very quickly, instantaneously, in fact. So how do you keep it staying with your meditation subject? And this is an important skill to develop before really moving on. Now, moving on is not going to change this quality of mental recitation, but it's going to start adding in an appreciation of what we call vitaka and vichara, and this is applied thought and sustained thought. In order for this meditation to develop and deepen, we need to note that the mind is not simply just do. It's a lot like the breath. There is an applying, and then there's a releasing, and you can't apply without having previously released, and you can't release without having been applied. And so the mind has this kind of yo-yo effect to it. We apply it to something, and then we let go of that thing so we can apply it to the next thing. In order to strengthen this quality of the mind, which is these are jhana factors. These are factors of a concentrated, powerful, energized mind. We have to bring this quality into our recitation. The way we do this is by noting a characteristic of the body part as we move through the list. And what do I mean by characteristic? Well, the Visuddhimagga suggests 5 characteristics that we can note. And I found these to be, they work. That's basically what I'm doing. So first we will think hair of the head, and then the characteristics. So a characteristic of color, a characteristic of shape. Both of these deal with what we can see, what we can perceive, and they are different. So the form, the shape, the structure is one thing, and the color is overlaid on top of that by perception. Yeah, so these are 2 different things. Matter does not inherently have color, but we perceive the color and in a separate step. So you can think either the hair is this color, or the hair is that color, or you're thinking of hair that is of a certain color. Yeah, or you and let the color be simple and prominent. Don't try to be exact. Don't say, well, it's a little speckled here, it's a little this, but just what's the basic affect. When you get into the structure of the eyes, you can only see 3 colors. Yeah. Everything else is just a mixing, right? In Buddhism, we have 4 primary colors, that being red, yellow, blue, and white. And these are pure colors that have a powerful effect on the mind. When we allow them to be purified of the other 3, then the mind gets it sees it as a very beautiful object. The funny thing is, it's also it can also be a very ugly object. Of pure color can be ugly in the right context, but I'll get to that later. So the color of the body part, and for nails, skin, and teeth, this will be usually is going to be white. Yeah, or and it's not just because my skin is white. It's like all skin below that level of pigment is a lot like white latex. Yeah, that's what it's the elastic material that is made of is simply like that. Yeah, and when you scrape some off, that's kind of the color you get from the scrapings, because that's what it is when the pigment is not there. Yeah, when it's just dead skin floating around. But yeah, just So you got color, shape, and you think of the shape of the individual part. So not going for the shape of the hair as a unit, you'll find that that's actually a bit of a delusion we have. We simplify it by paying attention to just a lump, yeah, because we don't want to pay attention to the individual things, but just to give a little bit of attention to, okay, this is composed of strands, yeah, and these are composed of individual teeth, yeah? And what the shape of those are. With the teeth, they're all different shapes, but kind of taking that in, yeah. With the nails, they're fairly similar in shape, but not totally, yeah. Yeah, they're not uniform. Now, the third characteristic is going to be direction. This is a fascinating addition to the list. So again, our body is the conduit for action, for karma. So if I were to say, note the direction of your body part, and I said from the expressions on your faces, you're like, well, in reference to what? Now that feels arbitrary, right? You know, like, well, where am I to note the direction? And it's not like that. In fact, from the moment we come out of the womb, we start moving. And when you start moving, you start to appreciate that you're moving against something. We call it gravity. Yeah. Now, because of gravity, when we move one part of our body, the other parts of our body, and you can see this, I can't perceive it as much as I can see it on the screen. When I move my arm, the rest of my body also moves. Yeah, because of gravity, because of motion, inertia, momentum, all of these things. So when we note direction, we're noting from the center of gravity of the body. Yeah, that being a point basically at the belly button and an inch or two in. That is our center of gravity, what they call the dantian in Tai Chi, you know, in martial arts. And it's an important point to know, yeah, especially if you're doing anything active. Most of us ignore the fact that whenever we move anything, we're having to reference that internally to give ourselves stability and to know how far to go and how much effort to put into something. So if we were, when we think hair of the head, and then we think, say, if we want to think of the direction, it's going to be a pure upward direction. Yeah, there is nothing more up than hair of the head. Yeah, and that's a very right there. That should stop a lot of mental processes, right? It should be like, wait, pure up. Oh wow. So when a yoga teacher is telling you, now imagine a rod going down, you know, your spine, and you know, pulling upward on your spine. It's like they're really trying to get you to, you know, have a bit more mindfulness of, you know, what's in that upward direction. And this is how we do it with this meditation object. Yeah. Now body hair is going to be in all the directions, obviously. Fingernails are going to be in the upward direction, and it's a little odd because, you know, usually we have them down below our shoulders and it feels like they're down there. Sometimes we have them in our lap and that's below the center of gravity, but because of the nervous system, because of how we reference them, because of our center of gravity, they're definitely part of the upward motion. Yeah. And so it's right there. You've got something that you can pay attention to. Yeah. Whereas toenails are obviously in the lower direction, and teeth are in the upper direction. Skin is all around. Yeah. You can choose any patch of skin, any patch of body hair, you know, and just think of the direction of it. Yeah, move your shoulder in one motion, and you come back through the list and think of the soles of your feet. Yeah, doesn't matter. You're noting a characteristic. The fourth one is going to be location, and this is simply noting where on the body this occurs. And it's a lot like direction, except direction is very simple, yeah. Whereas location, you're getting very specific. You're saying, okay, it dwells here for head hair. It dwells in the mouth. That it kind of should give you a bit of contrast. Yeah, this is more interesting, more engaging. There's a lot more qualities to it that you've got. Um, Once you think, oh, it's in the mouth, you're suddenly thinking about the mouth. You're thinking about all the things going on there. Very briefly, yeah. The final one is to delimit the body parts, and this is twofold. One, you're going to delimit it from the same body parts, and the other is you're going to delimit it from all the other body parts. And what does that mean? So with head hairs, you have hundreds or thousands of head hairs. I don't honestly know how much, right? So first you're going to delimit it from all the other head hairs. So like I said, you want to be paying attention to the fact that each one is a strand. It is not a clump. It is not a cluster. It is a strand. Yeah, we're not pine trees. It's one, 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 one. So, and a whole activity can be to kind of just move through and let the mind kind of wrap itself around the idea that these are all single hairs. And when the mind starts to get calm and collected around that, you will be able to perceive hair. And it's one of these things that suddenly you'll realize there's a level of contrast and beauty that has been lost through inattention. The other way of delimiting is to delimit from the other parts. So your head hair, the hair on your head is not your scalp. Yeah. And that's, I mean, we tend to reference it the same as if you were going to rub your hair on somebody, you would move your head down and you would rub your whole head on them. Yeah. You wouldn't get very close and just try to brush them with it. You would just jam your head in there and rub. Now, why would you do that? Well, you think of these things when you're meditating on the body parts. It's like, if I was going to do something with my hair, how would I do that? Yeah, this is the kind of thoughts that start to arise. And this is what I mean by Vitakka Vichara is first you have the mental recitation, you think hair of the head, and then you open your mind up to one of these qualities, yeah, to the color, the shape, the direction, the location, or the distinction, yeah. This is different than the other body parts, or this is different. Each one of these is individual and not the same as the ones like it. You're opening your mind to it. This is the other side of the coin where you are letting your mind make a connection, where you're letting your mind see something. This is a passive part of the mind, yeah? You cannot see without looking. Now, looking is a physical, but seeing is passive. You have to be able to let the information in. So your body is there, but you have to take a moment to let it in. We are not deciding, I have head hairs, they look like this, they're this color, they're this shape. You are saying, there are head hairs. You know that, yeah? Even for those who are bald, or there's a ghost of head hair. We know what head hair is all about, yeah? And but then you are giving this moment, and it can be just a moment, or it can be a second, or it can be 2 or 3 seconds. I suggest not 5 or 6 seconds. You are very likely to get distracted. Because I don't know about your mind, but my mind tends to, not be able to sustain anything for 6 seconds and goes and tries to do something else. Yeah. So really just a brief pause to note one of these characteristics, and then move on to the next one, and move on to the next one, and move on to the next one, and keep going through the list. And this already is a powerful, beautiful, energizing meditation. Now you find it's not necessarily a tranquilizing meditation. Yeah. So if you're very restless, this might not be your first approach. Or if you're going to go for it, then really begin with the verbal recitation. Really deal with the restlessness before you start looking for before you start opening the mind to the qualities. Yeah. Because once you start perceiving these characteristics, you are going to feel a lot of energy come into the mind, because now you're applying and sustaining your thought. You're getting in these rhythms, these patterns, and you're opening up to, wow, a lot of information And yeah, wow, it's very beautiful. It's very engaging. So this is already it's already a very complete meditation, and you can get into samadhi just using this. But this is not simply a samadhi technique. Yeah, this is not. You're just going to go through them and go backwards and go forward and through them. Apply, sustain, and then eventually it just feels so good that your mind goes into jhana. Now, that's possible, but this is also a very powerful basis for insight. And almost immediately, you're going to start feeling that there is resistance. And why is there resistance? So the Buddha talks about four bases for identity view. Yeah. And this is the idea of a permanent self residing in one of the aggregates being form, feeling, perception, mental fabrications, and consciousness. But since we are just looking at tangible form, and I really, say it like that, this is what we're doing. We're not paying attention to our mental experience of the body. We are paying attention to the actual body itself. It's objective, yeah? So since we're only paying attention to the body, identity view, which could have 20 possible ways, 5 aggregates times 4, we're only going to deal with form. So we've only got 4 possible ways that identity view, this idea of a permanent self, can arise in the body. And I tried to thought of how to quantify this and how I've seen in my own meditation. And I don't have any canonical references to point to, except to say that the Buddha talks about it as we think that form is self, or we think that our self is in the form, or we think that the form is possessed of a self, or we think that the self possesses form. Yeah. And it's the idea that our body is who we are, or who we are is inside of our body, or our body possesses who we are, or our body is arising within a sort of conscious overmind that is our true self. And you've probably heard all of these various aspects of identity view in regard to the body. You probably hear them all the time. This is how before we contemplate the body, this is how we develop our sense of I am this, he is that, she is that. Yeah, this is identity view, the forming of an idea of a concrete person there. Now this has to stop before we can really start to perceive the body as it is. So as we are doing this, and as we are letting certain characteristics in, it's good to watch for the ways that erroneous data will come in. And we have certain attachments that are born from this identity view. And one way is to notice that we don't have a face. Now, our body parts don't have a face. And this is to realize that if we what is happiness? You're like, oh, well, happiness is, and what is anger? Anger is, if you're an animator, if you draw, then you have to study these, right, Laura? Yeah, you have to, really think about what does anger look like? And you have to pull the parts out of it. What the eyes do, what the mouth does, what the head does, yeah? All of these are how that emotion is conveyed. But when you think of the hair of the head, there's no face there. There's no personality. These are just strands of protein, right? So if you find yourself thinking about how this is you, if you think about your face, obviously you're not thinking about hair. If you think about how it is in relation to your face, you're not thinking about hair. But even once you're just thinking about hair, if you're thinking about it as a clump or you're thinking about it as a style, you're still not thinking about hair. Yeah, you're creating an object that is not the actual hair. So to let the actual hair in, to be able to perceive it, you're going to have to get past that tendency to make a personality, an object, a tangible object out of it. Now, I think it's very fun to watch somebody who has a lot of fluidity to their idea of hair. They're always changing their hairstyle, and you'd be like, "Wait, what are you doing? You're changing my perception of you. Stop that! Stop tying it in buns. Stop draping it over your shoulders. Stop, cutting it. Stop, styling it. Stop changing it. You stop doing that." But it's very interesting. You realize that they don't have a whole lot of this getting in their way. Yeah. And I went to a Thai monastery for the winter, and there they shave their eyebrows in the Thai style. Nobody else does this. So I had big bushy eyebrows, and I looked at the eyebrows and I had to say, okay, you guys are coming off. But it took a minute. I had to say, oh, I guess I'm going to just do this like they do it, and not like, no, no, this is wrong. I'm going to keep my eyebrows. I mean, a lot of people are very attached to their eyebrows. Yeah, it's an aspect of their face. We have to get past that. We have to break that. We have to literally scatter it to the wind and be able to see these as individual pieces. They are not part of a collection that forms an object that is a person. They are just individual pieces. Yeah, there's no personality there. The second thing we got to watch for is the idea of balance, right? We are obsessed with balance. And the Buddha looked out at the people of the world and he said, these people are moving from one extreme to the other, yeah, in their fascination with becoming, with bhava. And this is the reality of our lives, is that we try to balance one thing with another and thereby achieve something that is not extreme, right? We lean towards one extreme and then we try to cultivate the other extreme and an idea that'll bring us to the middle. Now with our body, there is really no left and right. Yeah, we have this idea of symmetry and balance that is born from our fixation with our center of gravity. Yeah, we have to develop an appreciation of this, but we start to think of, it's hard to just like something like skiing. I had to learn this once. Cross country skiing is very different than downhill. Downhill, you're just like you just let gravity like take you down the hill. But when you're cross country, everything has to move in relation to everything else. But this can be a sort of a basis for personality view, the idea that there is one side and there's the other side. We are left-handed, or we are right-handed, or we are left-brained, or we are right-brained. Or, when we lean, we tend to lean on one side, right? We don't realize that our energy and our sense of self is off balance, that we have made preference, yeah? Or even that we have an underlying idea that the body is symmetrical. It is not. It can't be. There are certain things that just don't work. You can't have everything in the middle so that half is on one side and half is on the other. There's just not enough room. So your heart is on one side and your liver is on the other side and your spleen is on one side and your bowels begin on one side and end on the other. Yeah? Your body is not symmetrical and you've been processing this without knowing that you're processing it. So instead of trying to balance things, and you see this in meditation, you sit down and you put one leg on top of the other leg, and after that leg starts to go to sleep, you start thinking, well, shouldn't I put the other one on top now to kind of balance it out? And this is that delusion. Yeah, you think that making the other leg go to sleep will create balance. It's just a funny thought when you think about it. Yeah, and it's really an attachment that keeps you reacting to the world. Yeah, it keeps you in motion, keeps you generating karma. When you can accept that things are not balanced, then you can actually achieve a sort of internal poise. Not the sense that you're internally balanced, but in the sense of internally you're not rocking back and forth to try to achieve some faulty equilibrium based on adding two things to get zero. You're trying to negate something by adding something else. It's 1 + 1 does not equal 0. Yeah, it doesn't equal balance and centeredness. It's just more stuff. So in order to let the stuff fall away, to empty out, we have to stop adding, yeah, and just let it be off balance if it's going to be off balance, and to the point that we can just stop thinking that way. The left ear and the right ear are both ears. There is no, if there's nothing really that makes them substantially different because they're on different sides. Yeah, same with our eyeballs. Yeah, it's just an eyeball. Just think of it as an eyeball. And the same with other people, yeah? We another basis of personality view I'll call energy, and this deals with the more a vertical aspect. When energy comes up, we tend to think of, oh, this is good, this is nice, my energy is coming up. Or if it's going too much up, we tend to think, oh, I'm so restless, oh, I'm so anxious. Yeah. And when it goes down, we think, oh, this is good, I'm settling, yeah, this is groovy. But if it goes too down, we start to think, oh, I have no energy at all. I can't move. Such a slog, right? We have delusions regarding our energy. And we want to break through these, right? Because there is no energy within the body, right? You know? How do you are vaguely aware of how many thousands of calories of ATP of sugar that you've got to burn in your muscles, but that's not what you're referencing, is it? When you feel blah, it's this like sunken energy, but it's just an idea, really. It doesn't reflect anything in the body. Nothing in the body is blah until you act that out. Similarly, nothing in the body is until you start acting it out. And so we might get data in the body that's rising or sinking or swirling or sedentary. And we have this delusion of a self, yeah, that we have an energy body within us. And we've got to get past it, yeah, because it's in the way of the actual body. It is confusing us. It is distracting us from the actual body, which does not have that characteristic. That wasn't one of the ones I listed. So don't reference it. Don't think, oh, I'm having these incredible currents of energy in my arm. It's like, really, where? Right? What are you talking about? Is it blood? Is it lymph? Is it electricity in the nerves? You don't know. Because you don't know. Because what would that even look like? What would that even feel like? Yeah? There is a sensation that might accompany it, but that same sensation would change all the time. Whereas our idea of energy tends to be really predictable, right? It's the same sensation that comes, it's the same idea that comes up over and over again. So in order to really master this meditation, say we develop continuous continuity, yeah, application. And that's how we break through this idea of energy. We don't rush, we don't slow down, we just try to be regular, yeah, and however we're feeling, whether it feels good or whether it feels bad, and just keep doing it. It's a vital skill, and you will cultivate this paying attention to the breath, yeah, and the breath will cultivate that before many of the other ones, yeah, because you're going for tranquility, you're going for balance. You breathe in, you breathe out, you breathe in, you breathe out. Yeah, there's a certain balance there, but you will still have to confront this delusion, this objective personality view. The final thing that you will have to break through is the idea that our attention changes the body. Yeah, let's see if that sinks in. Is we have an idea like if I pay attention to my forehead, that energy begins to move to my forehead. Yeah. If I pay attention to my hands, the energy is starting to move to my hands. We might even have the ability that if I pay attention to my liver, energy starts to move to my liver, and I'm going to, have more digestive enzyme. I'm going to move healing energy to that spot. We have various ideas and delusions based on the idea that our attention is actually ourself. Yeah, but our attention is just half of our mind, is just half of thought, yeah, is vitaka. And there is vitaka, yeah, when we put our mind on something, that is what we mean by attention. And we might think that that somehow changes the body, yeah. If we keep paying attention to something and our posture gets a little off, we might be like, oh, wow, I'm doing that. I'm making my body, or our body's, if we get really stuck on some aspect of our body, then we will not be able to stop paying attention to that particular aspect, yeah? And this is why this meditation is, you want to be regular, but you also want to bring in the recitation and then let data come in, let a characteristic come in, and then the recitation, let a characteristic come in. Because you have to break this idea that you're only doing vitaka, that you're only applying the mind. that is the main point of this. I'm paying attention to the head hairs. I'm paying attention to the head hairs. I'm paying attention to the head hairs. Stay with the head hairs. Stay with the head hairs. That is not the way to meditate. That is a very bad way to meditate. And it is based on this delusion that our attention is a tangible thing. And in fact, our attention is more like the tide. You know, a wave comes in, and in order for the next one to come in, it has to go back out. Yeah. There's the water is flowing in and out, and it's the same with our breath. In order for a new breath to come in, the last one has to have gone out. In order for us to apply our mind to something new, we had to let go of the previous thing we were paying attention to. And we cannot master this until we've broken through that delusion that in some way our attention is a thing. I feel a lot, I'm paying attention to this, and I'm feeling a lot because of that. No, actually, the best way to cultivate mindfulness is to apply the mind somewhere and then let it go. Apply the mind to something and let it go. At first, it might feel like a very physical aspect, but you want that to kind of ebb away, to bleed away as you apply and let go and apply and let go. And it will feel less and less physical until you finally break through that delusion and you realize your attention does not exist within the body. There's no such thing. Yeah. And that you are simultaneously aware of all parts of your body at the same time. You can't get to that point until you break through the delusion that your attention, that you're aware of at the moment is you. That you are focused around that. Yeah? So these important bases for personality view. If you do nothing else with this meditation, look at those and work on those, and this will take a lot of time. Actually, this is not something where you just do it and then you're done. You're like, oh, I get it. Yeah. No, attention is just it's not me. And then you're good. Now you will find that even once you break through these and you kind of see finally what it's like to live in a world without them, that wow, lo and behold, something kind of comes back after a while, this sort of inertia. We've been using these for so long that we have to keep coming back and keep coming back to the body and the body parts and dividing and breaking down and letting them be just body parts, letting them be separate from each other, letting them be separate in and of themselves, letting them be just a part without a face, without a personality. That over time that becomes more and more natural, and we see that they're not me. They're not a conduit of me. They have nothing to do with me. Yeah. My thoughts are arising and ceasing, but the body is just the body. Yeah. And I'm causing it a lot of suffering with all of my machinations, which can stop, which really can stop. And once we see that, we are seeing cessation. We are seeing there was this source of suffering, this source of this congealed sankhara of mental ideas, and it's gone now. And this is what life can be like without that. And this is very powerful. And now you will probably know, and I know I've been talking for quite a while, but I figure we've gotten this far. We might as well make this a complete teaching rather than a part two. You might notice, or maybe you didn't, maybe you got as excited about all of this as I do all the time. You might have noticed I didn't talk about asubha. I didn't talk about the repulsive aspect. And I think most people never pick this up because they assume that this is, you are trying to see how gross the body is. Or many people get attracted to this because they think this is seeing how gross the body is, and they really want to take a look at that. And I said this suffers from this attraction repulsion, that this meditation doesn't create that. That already exists within us. This meditation reveals that, and it brings that to the forefront. So we have attraction and repulsion in regards to our body. Yeah. And this prevents us from seeing what is actually there. So the reason I have waited to talk about asubha is because the meditation waits to talk about the unattractive, unbeautiful nature of the body. That comes last, because you need to get past first the five hindrances. your distraction and your attraction and your aversion and your restlessness and your sleepiness, and most importantly, your doubt. And skeptical doubt, something I think we'll be talking about again. You have to be able to be willing to just do this, right? If you are doubting this as a meditation subject, if you're doubting the nature of the body, if you're doubting the nature of practice, then that's what you need to deal with first before you even consider the essential nature of the body. But very interesting, at the point that that doubt has ceased, has faded away, you will start to perceive the actual nature of the body, which is unattractive. And I say this is the actual nature of the body because you are born knowing this. The body is gross. Everybody is born knowing this, but we, over time, convince ourselves otherwise. We have this underlying tendency to try to make something that's unattractive attractive. Why? Because it brings us pleasure. Yeah, and as soon as our mother's milk brings us some pleasure, we start to decide that it's not gross. It's actually nice. I like the taste. This is nourishing. It's giving me all these good feelings. I think I actually like it. And over time, we begin to convince ourselves this is actually a beautiful thing. When if we thought about it, it's yeah, you know, and I'm sorry, yes, it's a dairy farm, milk, it's got mucus in it, it's got fat in it, it's got hairs in it, it's got, you try to make it as clean as possible, but it's, yeah, it's made of us, and what we are made of is that. And these are not inherently beautiful things. And when we come out, we stick our finger in our nose and then we wipe it on someone and we laugh. Because it's funny because we know that it's gross. And we know that the person's going to recoil, yeah? They're going to say, oh, thank you, that looks nice. It's a nice color. They say, that's gross. And this aspect of the body as being intrinsically unattractive is not something you would want to pick up. It's something that often we don't notice until the mind is very calm or until the body part is separate from us. When you find a hair on the floor on a table, you don't immediately pick it up and say, this is beautiful. You go, ooh, yeah, and you sweep it off. Um, Now, the Visuddhimagga also gives a nice little list of ways that once you've been moving back and forth, and once your mind has gotten very settled, such that you're starting to feel that even the basis for personality view have gone quiet, you've got this abiding full body kind of mindfulness arising, and it's not arising because you're like, oh, all in the head hair, head hair, and then, or body hair, body hair, not because you're obsessively focused on it, but because you're actually able to fluidly move. You're actually able to take one part and then let it go, and take another part and let it go, and then take another part and let it go, but also that they're becoming very interesting, very deep, very distinct, such that I'm actually able to perceive these because I'm not identifying with them anymore. When that happens, you're going to start to notice there are certain qualities that are kind of like, wow, I didn't even notice, but that's a little gross. Yeah. And these qualities are the color, the shape, the odor. They are the habitat and the location, and I'll talk about all of these. But the color is gross, and how can that be? Like, think the color of hair is gross. Well, put it in the right context. If you see it on an otherwise clean countertop, then that black hair is gross, isn't it? The blackness of it is distinct from the white of everything else, and it stands out. If you see a hair, if you're sticking your spoon into your breakfast cereal, yeah, and you see a hair there floating on the nice white milk, then the blackness of that hair stands out to you and sickens you a little bit. You're just like, I'm not. Do I really want to eat that? Most people don't find a hair in their soup and pull it out and go, oh, sweet protein, and put it back in their mouth. They look at it and they're like, this is, oh, oh, it's somebody's hair, yeah, and all the connotations that bring. Though, well, so the feeling um, is is the shape. Yeah. So once you pull it out, and that what's the texture? Yeah. How did you know that you had a hair in your mouth? With all the things going on in there, you know instantly when you have a hair in your mouth, yeah? And you try to get it out of there. So the shape is gross. And if you think about the shape of hair, that's how is that gross? Well, just every time you get an itch, what is itching? Yeah? It's like it's a little spindly little hair rubbing against something, yeah? That's what's unattractive, yeah. And ever since you start itching, is a little hair fell off and is rolling down the back of our neck. Yes, that is unattractive to us. It's frustrating. It's annoying. It stands out. The odor should be self-explanatory, and we really have to filter out odors. We acclimate to odors very, very quickly, and part of this is a defense mechanism, yeah. You don't have to be told that the odor of things is gross, but you might have not thought about what the odor of hair is. Yeah, until I stop and say, well, hair, it doesn't smell great. Because most people are using shampoo that tries to make it smell like strawberries or cedar wood or something. But that's because the hair itself smells like a dog or a horse. And it smells like a accumulation of oils and bacteria and all of these things. Yeah, it has a kind of musty, moldy kind of smell. And even skin, if you really get there, is kind of like a leathery smell. Yeah. Again, there's grease, there's fat, there's sweat. There's all kinds of odors associated with it. And the teeth, I'm sorry to say, are the grossest of all in terms of odor. Because if you've ever smelled the breath of somebody and gone like that, then you know that our mouths are very gross smelling things. Yeah. And we don't have to make them that way. You don't have to look for this. This is something that you might start to have these ideas coming up and coming to the surface in your meditation. And this is part of this can be a problem. If you're not ready for it, you can start to think something's wrong with you. Oh, that's so morbid. Like, oh, I can't believe these things are floating around in my mind. Who knew that underneath it all, I'm like a serial killer or something. I've just got all these ugly, gross, bloody thoughts. Or it's like I can't believe I can't believe I'm paying attention to so and so's, skin grease. Yeah. But this is the thing, is that it's not self, it's not a permanent self, and it doesn't reflect on you. It's actually just the way that the body is, and you're finally able to perceive it. So we don't go looking for these things. But once our mind has gotten concentrated enough, we start to open up that, yes, these are some things we should be able to start letting this information in without recoiling, without being afraid, without being disgusted, without being alarmed. Yeah. And as we start to let it in, we start to realize the most important characteristic of all, which is that of dukkha. And this is why it's called Asubha meditation, the meditation on the unbeautiful, because dukkha is a noble truth. And it is really our gateway to breaking the cycle of bhava, of becoming. Yeah. Not just breaking our habitual underpinnings of self view, which is permanent view, but breaking actual becoming itself. Once we see that the body is not something attractive, is not something that we would pick up if we found it on the street, we stop picking it up as we find it in our seat. Yeah, we stop thinking and obsessing and like, where can I take my body today? What interesting thing can I experience through my body? How can I express myself through my body more? Or, and all of the things that we might do is for cosmetics or clothing or interesting locations we might go to, even the foods that we eat, thinking, oh, this will make my skin really glow, or this will make me so healthy. I'll be able to go jogging and look really fit. All of the thoughts that might come up. And it's if we start to have this quality of unattractiveness float up, we are having the essential basic nature of the body float up. And when that happens, we are seeing truth. We are seeing a noble truth. And this is the best thing for the arising of faith. See something that you don't have to make true. See something that is true whether or not you are there, and you will be seeing Dhamma. You will be seeing reality. You will be seeing truth. And when you start to see truth, you will start to see that the Buddha is pointing us towards these things that allow us to let go of all the doing, let go of all the becoming, let go of the trying to make this so, and just pay attention to what really is. And so the body really is unattractive, yeah? But we've trained ourselves to see it as unattractive. When we start to break through that conditioning and see it as unattractive, we start to see, I don't want to be reborn. I don't want to have a body. Yeah, I don't want to be going through this again and again and again. Starting out as a little baby, you can barely, it's just a worm, barely able to control its limbs, and have to learn all of that, only to grow up and grow old and grow sick, and then die and lose everything that we've just cultivated in this endless over and over cycle. When we start to see dukkha, we start to see the Eightfold Path. We start to see why we practice. Yeah, this is not something we can rush to. This is something we have to let percolate up through the mind. But when we do, this is why this is called the Asubha meditation. This is why it gets that name, because this will be what breaks the link of bhava for us. This will be what becomes the most attractive meditation object. Once these unattractive qualities start to come up, and we start to see, oh wow, it's gross, and it's always been gross, then we're there. Yeah, we're starting to really energize the mind, and it will be so gripping and so amazing that we will realize we never really knew what the mind was. We never really knew what it's like to have a mental experience, and these will come up in what we call nimittas, or mental pictures. And we will realize that a mental picture has all five senses at the same time, whereas when we use one of our senses, otherwise we can only use one at a time. We can't see a sound, we can't smell a sight, yeah? We can't feel with our body a color. And but when we have a mental experience, when a nimitta comes up, it will have this quality of unattractiveness to it, but at the same time, it will be intensely beautiful. And why? It's because it has all of the qualities that we have sought in the sensual realm, all there, all at the same time. Our mind is liberated from the sensual realm when these are starting to come up naturally on their own, and that will lead us to a greater understanding of what is mind and what is the senses, what is thought and what is form, our physical form that is just there and is not actually us. And that will help us break what we think is this unbreakable connection between the two, yeah, where we try to express our thoughts through a body that has nothing to do with the thoughts. Okay, so now yeah, I've gone on long enough, and that's how that's going. And if you'd like to know where it goes from there, yes, the jhanas and the four immaterial jhanas and breakthrough attainments, the four paths and fruits and all of that good stuff. But that's where you see an expanded sutta like mindfulness of the body. Talks about all of the possible ways that you can apply this in daily life. Yeah. But for now, this will be just on this particular subject and how to use this meditation. And if you'd like any further information, I encourage you to either reach out to me or reach out to somebody who has cultivated this, many monastics in the forest tradition who have been in robes for a number of years will have at some point been encouraged to cultivate this, because again, they didn't get into the robes without being taught this. Though not all of them pick it up and develop it, everybody's been exposed to it. They know that this is essential to the Buddha's teaching, and this is what he thought was the best way to help people attain the same enlightenment that he had found. And so with that, I leave you on this new moon night. May this be a seed of wonderful practice, and sadhu.